All right, everybody. How you doing? It's News Debate. I am Lee. Great to have you here back in the saddle, back in front of the mic. Lots of news to talk about. And right here at the top of the show, joined by patreon.com/NEWZ debate, subscriber, supporter, and friend, awesome guy, Bjorn. Bjorn, how you doing over there on stereo?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a long time. Great to hear from you. Why don't you give us an update? Last time we heard from you, kids' birthday parties, homemade cakes, some sort of like play place adventure. How did all that go?
Oh, that all went great. Well, did a little work travel, back in the grind, enjoying the Pacific Northwest rainstorms. Yeah, going well.
Yeah, hopefully you'll have a breather. I think you just have a couple of kids, so only twice a year. You don't go all out for, I mean, it would be a different kind of party, but do you and your wife have big parties or is that just for the kids?
No, we usually just um, go to dinner or something.
It's the adult choice. Yeah, that's a transition you got to make.
I
Let
think
me
last
think
year
here.
you got me tickets to the Ren Fair for my birthday, so that was peak.
Oh, you go to Renaissance fairs.
Hell yeah. Nerd to the
You like
extreme. Oh, yeah.
dress up and bring a sword? Like, how does that work? I don't know if I've ever been one. I think I've seen some video.
Yeah, they're fun. Uh, I mean, I go to Comic Cons too. Um, and sometimes I dress up. Depends on how much time I've had to think about it and or plan. But yeah, you got to have a little bit of a cloak around. Just throw a cloak on and go on up. You'll be fine. It's fine. You also don't have to dress up for Ren fairs or Comic Cons. It's just fun to see the costumes and engage in the revelry. Shouting huzzah!
Huzzah! I challenge you to a duel, sir. Oh man, do you know what would be a really cool twist on that? Go up to a lady, challenge her to a duel. Yeah, you don't see that a lot in the movies. Um, we have Apostate Nate joining us over on Twitter. We had a couple people over on Twitter Spaces request to speak. I think Apostate Nate is handling some things. He's going to join us later in the show. I wonder if he's gone to a Renaissance fair or two. What's the worst one to not dress up for? Are there more people dressed to the nines on the Renaissance Fair day or the cosplay Comic Con day?
No, I would say there's always I think there's a minority of people who dress up on both, but I'd say maybe more people dress up for Ren Fair, and you can be a little bit more generic with your dress. You don't have to be a specific person in Ren Fair. You can just throw on a cloak and walk around. Whereas on Comic Con, it's definitely more in the culture to be as accurate as possible and have a homemade costume, blah blah blah.
Yeah, if you go to Comic Con, one of those cosplay events, people go really all out. It's quite spectacular. I've never been to a Renaissance fair, but I feel like what you said is basically the dress code. You just put on a cloak. Like as long as you're not wearing jeans and Nikes, you put on a cloak, you kind of feel like you fit into the Ren fair, right?
Yeah, and again, I think most people don't dress up. You just go there for the turkey legs and the drinking ale out of a horn.
Turkey legs, yeah, that sounds more like a state fair, except for the ale out of a horn thing. But yeah, no, that sounds like a good time. Maybe I'll have to check one of those out when the weather warms up. Gosh, that would be really interesting to interview somebody. It's kind of like being a carny. Like if you work Renaissance fairs, you just like travel around the country from fair to fair, probably doing the same old shtick, but to new audiences. Ooh, yeah, that's a dying art. I feel it. Or are those more popular now? Are they having like a renaissance of Renaissance fairs?
I don't know. For my what do we go? Or just for Valentine's Day, I guess. we went over to of course, there's like a circus troupe in Portland, as you know, Portland. We went to like an independent little circus troupe, and they did some really cool acts. Random throwing people into the air or standing on poles on top of faces and things. Uh, but yeah, I think that the carnies and acrobats are kind of in the same sort of like thing. In the winter, I guess this is inside of a theater. They did this one, and then probably in the summer they probably do the tours and the fairs with other people. But yeah, it was pretty cool, pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's funny about Portland. It's like, oh, hey, did you go to like a circus troupe show? Now these guys are my neighbors. This kind of came over for a couple buds. Well, you probably wouldn't be drinking buds in Portland. That's fair. Yeah, that's certain cities definitely. The likelihood we have to figure out the percentage of likelihood that you would just be walking around and run into some kind of circus group higher in Portland than I'd say like Dallas. Yeah. It's news debate. Okay, so Bjorn, it's been a while. There's been a lot of news. The thing I think is the most interesting, just because it's such a defeat, but then also you pull out the Trump card and you do it anyways. The tariffs were found to be unconstitutional from the conservative Supreme Court, and so I'm really happy this happened. Just that I can say that, because everybody always says, "Oh yeah, no, the courts." They're in Trump's pocket, except for several times, like constantly, stuff like this. Well, maybe not like this, but if you actually pay attention to it, yeah, he wins a lot, and that's understandable. But if you actually look at it, every once in a while you get one of those, oh, the Supreme Court saved Obamacare. Oh, they dismantled the Trump tariffs. But then through some weird executive action that I believe is legal because it's a specific power, you can just raise all tariffs. And I think it was 10%. And he's either saying it's going to go to 15% or it's already gone to 15%. So it's just really comical because all of that butt kissing, like when he went to Korea and they gave him a crown, and then we were talking about the crown was actually designed off of a crown that would have been given to a woman, so that was kind of funny. But just everybody around the world kissing his butt to get these favorable tariffs, and now it's all wiped clean and everybody just has the same level. But that's what I've been paying attention to. What's big over in Portland with the circus group?
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, this is what happens when I try to be funny. What's on your mind? What news is rattling over in Bjorn land?
Oh, I was listening to the thing where what his name El Menchi or El Mensch, the cartel dude, was just like killed by the Mexican army, which was kind of a big deal in itself. And now apparently there are armed cartel people like causing like mass destruction. They're like setting cars on fire. I guess they invaded the Guadalajara airport. And so there's definitely some retaliation going on to the killing of their top dude, which is kind of wild. Saw some video of people in the airport like running, and they're like just from people invading the airport. So I don't really know what's happening, but it sounds like a fluid situation.
Yeah, that's another interesting topic. Thanks for bringing that up. I was seeing that in my news feed. Let's share this over on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate and rumble.com/user/NEWZ debate. Forgot to mention at the top of the show, live over on Twitter Spaces, request to speak, live over on stereo, leave voice messages. And if you want the visuals, we do go through a lot of visuals. Check out video live streams, and all that information is at bit.ly/NEWZ debate. I jumped over to the BBC because, as you know, Bjorn, I love looking at, even though this is like BBC America, um, I love looking at like foreign press and how they report on different stories having to do with the United States. This is specifically about Mexico, but hey, I'll take it. Mexico's most wanted man, the leader of the feared Jalisco New Generation, sounds like a WWE club. Drug cartel has been killed during a security operation that was, I guess, designed to arrest him. Went a little too far there. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, the Mencho, died on Sunday today as he was being taken to the capital, Mexico City. Why isn't our capital called America City? Gosh dang it. Mexico, something they do better than us. We really just got to name. I hope he doesn't name Washington, D.C. Trump City, but America City. I take that. After he was being taken to the Capitol. And that was after seriously being injured in clashes between his supporters and the U.S. Army. His supporters, that's interesting. Yeah, my supporters took on the Army. When your supporters take on the Army, I feel like another description is appropriate. 4 gang members were killed in a town. We'll leave it at that. 3 Army personnel were also injured. The U.S. had given Mexico information that assisted the operation. But then the drug cartel, the gang, the supporters, retaliated by setting cars on fire, building roadblocks, attacking security forces in 8 Mexican states. I'm going to criticize Mexico now after I praise them for Mexico City. I really like it when other countries have territories or provinces. It just always confuses me when it says states. Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum. When you think about Mexico, I think about the Scheinbaum family. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Scheinbaum Pardo later urged people to remain calm. And she took to X. Mexico still uses X. She wrote that in most parts of the country, activities are proceeding normally. You know that it's bad when they have to make those sort of generalizations. The average person in Mexico is not being set on fire and attacked by gang cartels. Most places are proceeding normally. So the man, El Mencho, now deceased, is a 59-year-old former police officer. Oh, he turned. He ran a vast criminal organization responsible for trafficking huge quantities of cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl into the U.S. Oh, okay. So Trump was right. Drugs are coming from Mexico. I mean, he was blowing up Venezuelan boats, but close enough for Trump, I guess. The fact that he's somewhere in the general region. Mexico had offered a $15 million reward for information leading to the capture of El Mencho, and that's what they were trying to do. How does that work? So if they offer the reward, and then like military forces or police arrest him, is it whoever put the cuffs on him gets the 15 mil? It reminds me of, was it the guy who shot Charlie Kirk? Unless you believe the conspiracy theories, his dad turned him in. It was either him or some other shooter in the last year, 6 months. And there was like $1 million reward. And I just sat there and thought, we were talking about this during the show, and I thought, I really want that dad to get that $1 million. Yeah, so the Defense Ministry of Mexico says the country's special forces planned and executed the operation. So, I mean, he was killed, so maybe you don't get the reward. But if they took him alive, one of those Mexican Navy SEALs could have had a cool 15 million.
Excuse me, Lee. Excuse me. I think since I gave the
Yeah,
information, I
here's a
should get the money.
burning bus
Send it to Dennis.
that appears to have been used as a roadblock by organized crime during the Mexican military's move against El Mencho, those supporters they talked about. Eyewitnesses have filmed plumes of smoke rising over several cities, including Guadalajara, one of the host cities. Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah. Bjorn gets a cool $15 from, I ain't got none of that Mexican millions. And of course, it's BBC, so they gave the British pound equivalent. It was like 11.1 million pounds. So yeah, this is interesting. One of the host cities of the upcoming FIFA World Cup, the British BBC says forthcoming because they're Brits. Guadalajara, plumes of smoke rising. And that's just one of the cities. But don't worry, the Mexican president says most places in Mexico are doing just fine. Okay, so you brought this up, Bjorn. This is interesting. Do you travel to Mexico? Obviously, this is news, so you could have just seen it. But that's the weird thing is that as some Central and Latin American, Central and South American, Latin American countries are getting safer, Mexico seems like for some time now it's been getting less safe. This definitely seems like a feather in that cap. But a lot of Americans, and I guess I would say they go to Mexico, but there's a lot of range. So you can go to Mexico and just go around, or you can go to these all inclusive, safe, security ridden, guarded facilities and just enjoy the weather and whatever, plants they have in the facility. And you're like, hey, I'm in Mexico. So, there's a lot of range, but, gosh, in the last couple of years, there's been those things where like some resort in Mexico used like illegal alcohol. I don't know what it was. And like a bunch of people died, and then there's always people that get kidnapped. So Mexico is a place that definitely could have some more security. We can talk about why, but that seems to be the case. So what do you think about this, Bjorn?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder like how prepared they were for like the retaliation. I mean, like were they anticipating it, or did like Trump just send them a thing said, hey, go bomb them here?
And I think I've identified
do
this happened a few shows ago. There's some weird thing where stereo, yeah, here it comes in. Stereo will like delay. So what I'm I think I fixed it. Bjorn, can you hear me now over on stereo?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're back in business. So yeah, you were saying, was Trump involved with this? Was it on purpose? Was it just happenstance? But yeah, this is unfortunate. I feel no remorse for the killing of this man. Seems like a terrible human being, but it just has really snowballed into so much more violence, and it just really gives Mexico a bad name. Perhaps it's deserved because this sort of thing happens, but then again, we have had some. I don't know if we've had this kind of, well, yeah. When you look back at Black Lives Matter, we've had some kind of things in the range. This seems a lot more like military and people taking over things as opposed to occupying buildings like you saw with Black Lives Matter or the Gaza protests. Now, a lot of those were burned down, so there's a lot of violence, but okay, apples and oranges at best. Yeah, this is unfortunate. Let me see if there's anything else. Says the BBC says the killing of El Mencho represents a victory for the Mexican president, her fight against the country's drug cartels. Sounds like it was a costly victory, but okay, I buy that. It also could strengthen her relationship with President Trump, who has often demanded more progress on security in Mexico. However, if the security forces can't bring this situation under control quickly, the Mexican administration's victory may be overshadowed by the cartel's violent response. That's what I was kind of getting to. It's a costly victory at best. You have to say it's a costly victory. The cartel has gained notoriety since it was formed in about 2010 for a series of attacks on security forces and public officials. It has downed an army helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade. Yeah, that's why I said we shouldn't call this supporters. Killed dozens of state officials and has even been known to hang bodies of its victims from bridges to intimidate its rivals. Yeah, that's deep stuff. Let's check in with ChatGPT. What's the latest on the violence happening in Mexico surrounding the death of a drug cartel leader?
Recently, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, known as El Mencho, was killed during a military operation in Jalisco. Following this, violent reprisals erupted in multiple states, including attacks and roadblocks, even impacting tourist areas like Puerto Vallarta. While authorities are investigating, this has caused a wave of instability and safety concerns in the region.
ChatGPT, everybody. And it was very fitting because we got like a British voice and we were reading from the BBC. Yeah, that's definitely big news right now.
I was just going to say Puerto Vallarta has not been, I think, up on the tourist for a while just because there's been a lot of drug trade through there. A lot of people have like advised not to go there, as well as like some of the places that are like easiest to like get to, like the ocean routes just automatically become like cartel routes. Some of them have to be touristy spots. I was just like doing this thing with my kids the other day where you figure out how many countries or states you've been to. I think my country count was like something like 34 or something. And like never really had like much crime problems in any of those countries except in Mexico. Clearly like that's anecdotal, but it's the one that probably makes me the most afraid and not wanting to go back of all the places I've ever been.
Yeah, clearly it can depend on where you go, but I've been to Mexico, never had any problems, but I know some people who have had problems, and I've read about people who had even worse problems than that. So anecdotal, but I still think useful. Appreciate you sharing that. Well, yeah, you've been to 34 countries. I know you met your wife while you're doing some aid work. Was it in not Jamaica? But was it the island that's split in half and one side is much better than the other?
Yep. Haiti. That's the island of Haiti. The island is called Hispaniola. One side is Dominican Republic. The other side is Haiti.
And so since you guys met both outside of your own country, you from the U.S. and your wife from Israel, has she traveled as much as you? Has she hit around 30 countries?
No, I don't think her state count is quite as high as mine. I did a lot of traveling before we met. Yeah.
Interesting question. Has there been, either just from hearing about your wife's travels or traveling once you guys became a couple, which is the better passport Maybe she's got an American passport now, but which is the better passport if you've found that one is superior, the American passport or the Israeli passport? Clearly, it can depend on where you're going, but is there just kind of a general winner that you found?
American by far. I think most of the 54 Muslim majority countries won't allow that in. I think that's not true for, I think, for like Morocco, maybe Indonesia, but they just won't even allow you to travel, I think, most of those. So I think that needs a ChatGPT fact check to see, but I think it's a lot of them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Let's do that just now. But my guess is we'll find this out maybe with a follow-up question, or maybe we'll hear it from ChatGPT voice in a moment with the first round. But my guess is there are countries that won't let Israelis go, but Israel would let them in to Israel. I feel like that's probably the case, but let's figure this out. How does an Israeli passport work? Are there places you can't go? And if so, are people from those countries able to go to Israel? So it's not blocked on both sides, or is it blocked on both sides?
So, an Israeli passport is a normal travel document, but it comes with some complexities. There are countries that bar entry if you have an Israeli passport or even an Israeli stamp, often due to political reasons. Some examples are Iran, Lebanon, and Syria. Now, on the other side, Israel does restrict entry from certain places too, especially without special visas. So, yeah, there are reciprocal restrictions, but not always perfectly symmetrical. It's a bit of a patchwork depending on the specific country.
Can you give me a general overview of is it fair to say it's equal, that there are just as many places, even if they're not the same places, that an Israeli passport holder can't go, as well as people from some of these other places can't go to Israel? My gut tells me more people can go to Israel than Israelis can go to their countries, but it's just a guess.
Your gut feeling is pretty close to reality. While Israeli passport holders face restrictions in certain countries, especially in parts of the Middle East or countries that don't recognize Israel, Israel itself, while having security screening, actually allows visitors from many places. Even some countries it doesn't have formal relations with can enter under certain conditions or special visas. So, yes, more nationalities can visit Israel than the other way around. It's not equal, but rather a lopsided situation.
I'm calling a victory here. Yeah, I thought that would be the case, and it sounds like it probably is. So, Bjorn, if your wife has a U.S. passport, which I assume so, I'm just guessing. You may have told me that in the past and probably forgot. What's really interesting about that is the multiple passport, decision. So I only have American passport. But if I had American passport and a British passport, or some kind of EU passport, or a Canadian passport, it would be cool because I think it would unlock some opportunities. Like if you wanted to live abroad, I think there are certain countries, even developed countries, where it's easier to do things than others. For instance, talking about the UK, they're no longer part of the EU. So when they were part of the EU, they could just go anywhere in the EU, and now you'd have to have a visa other than just for travel purposes. So if I go abroad and I'm going to Egypt, and I have a British passport and I have an American passport, for a hypothetical here, which one do I use? I assume when I'm leaving the U.S., I use my American passport, but when I land in Egypt, am I also locked into that? If I go from Egypt and travel over land, and I go somewhere else, and then I fly from, let's say I'm in Spain. I made it all the way to Spain, and then I'm flying from Spain to Russia. I think I could decide what kind of passport I could use. I've heard stories about people flying into countries and accidentally handing the person the wrong passport. So maybe if you were part of a travel itinerary that you started with one passport and you handed it to someone else, that could create some confusion. I think there are some rules about dual citizenship that are different from country to country. So maybe you're not allowed to have it or something. But Has that ever come up with your wife if she has an American and an Israeli passport?
So generally, I think you can just choose which one you want to do. Some places will ask if you have another passport somewhere else. It also seems like some places know that she has an Israeli passport and will be like, "Where's your other passport?" Like they just know and know some sort of system that just knows. But yeah, in general, I think you can just choose. Like even like depending on the day, the week, the month, or even the year, America will have like certain problems. Like I think, like getting into Brazil, for example, you can't just get like usually in lots of countries that have very like open relationships with America, you just arrive in the airport and you go to customs and you get your visa right there. But some others make it more restrictive, and you have to like get an advanced visa. Like Brazil is one of those places, and the only reason that Brazil does that is because we do that to Brazil. So it's kind of like this reciprocal thing. It's like we don't let all the Brazilian we aren't completely open for the Brazilians, so they therefore do that for us. But so again, depends on which countries. Like Vietnam is the same way for America, but most other places you can just get it in country. And I think probably depending on what the reciprocal restrictions are on each of those would probably determine that. But typically, we just travel on the American one. I don't ever really use the Israeli one unless like we haven't been to Israel together. But that's when she goes there, she would use that one. She went there.
Yeah, that's the one place you definitely should use the Israeli passport. Yeah, I'm sure there is some database, and if you've been to a country previously and used one passport, I assume that's locked in, and so they would know you have it. And then if you use the comically, give me a moment, your wife like walks up to immigration at the airport when she's landed in some country, hands them her U.S. passport, and they look at her and they're like, I'm gonna go with my gut feeling here. Do you also have an Israeli passport? Like no information, just looking at her. Sizes are up and down. Israel. Yeah, that's comical, but that's smart. So if you have an additional passport or more, and you can use it to avoid some restrictions, like you just mentioned, that may be reciprocal, or just for whatever reason it's easier with this passport versus that passport. That's the dream. I'd love to. Man, I've mentioned it on the show, specifically the EU. If I could get my hands on an EU passport, that just, when I meet Europeans when I'm traveling or here in the States, and, someone's from Italy, and I'm like, oh, wow, like, okay, so where you been? It's like, oh, yeah, I've traveled Europe and all over the world. Where have you lived? Excuse me? What was that? I mean, like, if I was you and I had that EU passport, even if I loved my family, loved Italy, great food, pretty good weather most of the time, and they got some range. The Winter Olympics are in Italy, so clearly they have, different things going on in the country. You never want to live in Greece or France or Romania. I mean, you could go even further to the east, live a little bit cheaply. That's the thing. And, if I grew up that way, maybe I wouldn't think that way. Just like if you grow up rich versus growing up poor, it can affect, how your mind works and what you dream of. Oh, the freedom of being rich, because you just can buy anything you want. Okay, well, there's a lot of strings attached. The freedom of being poor, middle class. Maybe there's less pressure from the family or something, but you're poor. It kind of sucks, especially in the United States. The freedom of an EU passport. Oh, man. Because that's really the place. I mean, go on, Bjorn. Yeah.
I was going to say I mean, you could use the same argument for folks in the United States, because I mean, like the size of the United States is so huge, and we have so many different cultures and different sorts of, biodomes or whatever, different sort of attractions. I mean, I know people who've like never left their state, not even just to travel. And I think that, not because they didn't have the funds to, but just because they're like, well, got everything I need in Kansas. Why the hell do I need to leave? So I just think that there is some people who just don't have a travel or wanderlust mindset and just prefer to stay wherever they are. But I mean, even if people are going to be traveling in the United States, oftentimes people don't move. I don't know how many states I've lived in, but it's a lot. Maybe that's impacted my movement in the world. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. Is like, are military brats more likely to travel? Assuming so, yes, than folks who are never really moved, never really traveled at all, or never moved around.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. I would counter that with, if you live in a big state, you can drive hours and you're still in the state. And okay, maybe it's different. I mean, Texas has a lot of range. California has a lot of range, right? Texas is huge. California is long. Alaska is bigger than most states combined. Not a lot of people live there, but okay. I mean, Alaska has roads. I'm sure you could drive for hours upon hours and hours in Alaska. Europe's not quite like that. So that would be my first. You can drive a couple of hours, and sometimes if you plan it correctly, you can cut through a couple of different countries on the way to your destination. And then secondly, most of the time when you go from, I know Belgium's a bit of an outlier because it's like split, but most of the time when you go into different countries, the language changes. You can argue because of immigration in the United States, there's like millions upon millions of native Spanish speakers in the United States. And, we got people from all over the world, but most of the time, unless you're going to a particular part of a town, you go from town to town. I think there's less change than there is, going a similar distance in Europe. So that's, I think, maybe the difference for me is that it's not just about going somewhere new, and it's not about how far the journey is, either with time or distance, but it's like, where you go, how different it is from where you were. And even if it turns out, hey, the Italian guy I was talking about a moment ago moved to France and hated it, at least he knows that now. Like, there's probably some positive things he got out of it. I know the French are the French, but that's what I'm really attracted to. And the EU is really special because, like, there's no Asian EU. We don't have a North American EU. There's no Central South American EU. You could argue open borders that we usually have in the United States up until recently, not completely open, but pretty open compared to most other places, even Canada, allows a lot of people from Central and South America to kind of go as they please. But if we're talking about like legally and in a much safer way for most people, yeah, the EU really is the final frontier for me. That is so attractive. Gotta find myself an EU lady. Or hey, equal opportunity. Marry for a passport, EU man. It's probably legal there. Yeah, that's really exciting for me. We got a Apostate Nate over on Twitter Spaces. I think he sent me a message, says he was still rolling through some things on his end, but he's listening. We'd love to hear from you when you have the time. We have some other people over on Twitter Spaces as well. I think coming in and out, feel free to request to speak. We're also over on stereo. You can leave a voice message. Speaking of stereo, haven't introduced this yet. So I was just trying to think of something that people have heard about and could give their opinion on, because I wasn't quite sure what the real big story was that I wanted to focus on today. And I don't think it's this, but I thought people at least could play around with it. So my two options over on the stereo poll: satisfied with the Epstein files. So those millions upon millions of files that has been released as of late, a lot of people have been pointed out, not necessarily of any obvious crime, but like it's the yuck factor. Like, you're hanging out with this guy. Not so much with Trump. I think the most recent release actually hasn't had anything to do with him, where the photos and all the other emails and the drawing that he says he didn't draw, that was much more time ago. But there's been a bit of a reckoning with the millions of files that have been released. So that's the first option. I'm satisfied with the Epstein files. Hey, that's a pretty good release. Or need more documents. I can imagine there are things that have been held back. I can imagine those things actually do have to do with Donald Trump. I'm not saying that if they came out, it would really change his situation, but maybe just more of the same that we've seen. I absolutely think that's possible and perhaps even likely that some of that stuff hasn't come out. But so much has come out recently, plus the previous disclosures. I selected. I'm satisfied with the Epstein files release. I think we've kind of gotten to the point of, all right, this is what it is, and they're still going through them. I saw in the weeks past that the government released files that had like new photos of women that were not obviously minors, but right around that level, and then certainly people who were above the age where you don't have to talk about legal reasons to hold that back for minor protection, but just the fact that like photos of Epstein victims, some showing their faces, some showing people in different stages of nudity, were released. And then, if I remember correctly from the New York Times, that was quickly taken off the internet because the New York Times actually found a lot of this stuff and notified the government and said, hey, are you aware that this is what we found? And there have been other things that were up and then down, and then sometimes they go back up. So there's a lot of that different stuff. But that was an interesting component of this. And since they're starting to do that they actually haven't been able to pay enough attention at the millions of documents that they released that may have contained minors that shouldn't have been there, or just women who are victims, all the things I just talked about. That sort of starts to tell me that they're getting to the point that they're just throwing files out the window and be like, hey, everybody, just read it. And I think that's kind of where my satisfaction starts to kick in. I feel like we're finally starting to get this. We can jump off of this and talk about another release of information that Donald Trump has teased. But let's jump over to Bjorn. Do you have a thought on this? Are you satisfied? Do you still want more? Do you agree with me that it could be even likely that even if it's not a lot of stuff, they're definitely holding some things back, but certainly they've given us quite a lot of documents to go through as of late?
That question was posed to me. Didn't quite hear that, but yeah, I think I'm in the more documents camp. I feel like there's still more stuff. I have no idea. I'm pretty confused about how much there is. I've heard this is everything, or I've heard this is like 10%. So I don't really know, and I don't think we'll ever really know. But yeah, I think probably we're not going to get everything released in this administration. I think at the same time, Biden released all this stuff when he was in president. And that's another piece that I'm like confused about. Like, what's the deal with that, Jack?
Yeah, that's an excellent point to bring up. Thank you for that. I don't particularly blame people who were president before now, including Trump's first term and Biden.
But you've hit the time limit for this conversation. Please.
Oh my gosh, I hit my time limit. Yeah, I just had ChatGPT sitting there and wasn't saying anything. Wow, I didn't realize that could happen. Hey, that's a new record, everybody. All right, we'll pull that back up when we need it. But yeah, as I was saying, I don't really hold those presidents accountable because it wasn't in the news. Like, how many files from how many different interesting cases, from the ones that people recognize by name and topic to ones that most people haven't heard of, are probably able, if someone really cared, to be released, if someone made it their mission, that haven't been released. So I gotta say, I give Trump credit here, even though they lied about it. And Pam Bondi, was it, who was like, oh yeah, it's on my desk, and then it wasn't on her desk. I mean, eventually they have released quite a lot. And why hadn't this happened before for such a big case? My answer is because it is more powerful now in the news than it was in recent years. It was big and it died down. It came up and it died down, and this is just one of those cycles. And so I give President Trump credit on this. And yeah, it is a good question. I don't know of a specific reason why Biden couldn't have done this, other than it just wasn't on his plate in the same way it's been for Donald Trump, mostly because Donald Trump talked about this over and over again and brought it back into the news. But also, this is something, I don't want to say this was okay in the past. I'm not saying that, but this is something that I think, if Epstein were alive now and this was just breaking, this would be the biggest story in like the history of stories. But when it happened, it was a big story and it certainly got coverage, but it wasn't as big as it is now. So what I'm trying to say is that while it was not okay in the past, it was less it was less snowballable. Like, I mean, this is like the perfect time if this were to happen now, where this would be such a bigger story than it happened in the past. And I use references to kind of show this, is that the people, as it Prince Andrew and Bill Gates and other people who we knew in the past that they had these relationships. It was very clear they did, but we didn't quite know the extent. If we learn more about that, well, this is enormous news compared to maybe big news in the past. And even if it's like, oh, more documents come out that just further demonstrate what we already knew about XYZ celebrities or important people in the past, that would not have been as big of a story as it is today. Today, even if we're just confirming what we already knew, it's like, aha, gotcha. Well, no one's going to charge this person with a crime. It just shows that, yes, we already knew they had a relationship and we see more evidence. Aha, I gotcha. There it is. I feel like 2025, 2026, for a multitude of reasons, this is just a perfect storm for a story like this. And so to go back to Biden, yeah, he could have released all this stuff, but that storm was still forming and it was years off. Unless I'm missing something, Bjorn, and I'm going to throw to you now to hear your perspective. I'm not aware of anything Biden did to stop this from happening, particularly. So it just kind of goes back to, it wasn't as big of a deal back then. Does that seem logical to you? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Because I think it is interesting to talk about Biden, the most recent president, and he probably could have done all this if he wanted to, just like he could have done whatever he wanted, like Trump is doing now, and got a lot more progressive legislation, a lot more progressive executive orders, and just done kind of whatever he wanted. And he didn't do that because that wasn't precedent. I really hope, as you and I have talked, that if we get a Democrat in the White House anytime soon, they just go balls to the wall and do whatever the hell they want to. I think that needs to be the new normal because there's no uncorking this genie. But let's go back to what I was talking about, Epstein and Biden. What do you think about my thoughts?
No, I think you're on it. I mean, I think I'd imagine so much of being president is just like trying to deal with the fire or the public pressure that you have while you're trying to get your agenda done. There are scandals, there are things that you have to respond to, and then you decide, well, how much pressure is there out there? Do I even need to respond to this or that? And I think the other factor with this difference between the Biden and Trump is that Biden at least had the appearances or the ethic that they're going to keep the hands off from the DOJ, or clearly Trump has been much more seemingly running the DOJ from afar, a little bit more, at least on that spectrum. I feel like, as the precedent before Trump was, the DOJ is not part of the administration. You pick the person in the direction, but you don't really micromanage the DOJ. So I feel like, it was kind of up to the attorney general to do that, and that's not what they really chose to do. And there was no public pressure. So I think you are on the money on this one.
Yeah, I like the DOJ component. That one didn't come into my mind when I was speaking, but I think you're absolutely hitting the bullseye there. It really just shows what you can do when you will do anything. And I wish we had a lefty that would try that. Apostate Nate, I apologize. I didn't see your hand, but it's been up for a little bit of time. It's great to have you here on the show, joining us over on Twitter Spaces. Go ahead and say hello and also give us your thoughts on this. I hope you have some.
Hey, can you hear me, Lee?
Loud and clear.
Oh, good. So yeah, I think it's an interesting take that you have about giving Trump credit for what has been released. Only because there was so much yelling and screaming and deflection and diversion and talk. And look at the types of inconsistent things he said all along. The files are there; they're on our desk. No, they're not. It's a Democrat hoax. He had Mike Johnson at one point positing the idea that maybe Trump was an undercover agent seeking to bring Epstein down. Is it good that we have more information? Yeah, it is. But I think the public had to do so much pissing and moaning that I'm going to be a little bit slower to pass out credit. I'll end there.
Yeah, it's a fire that Trump started with his own matches, right? So I don't think we would have anywhere near this interest if he hadn't made it. You know, certainly on the right, the whole Pizzagate, QAnon, and all that stuff. You know, that was there, and he had his had his fingers over there as well. You know, he was part of that. But even though there was so much lying, like with the list on the desk, like that, you know, that's never going to go away. That's a great reference. He still didn't have to do this. And this seems like quite a release as of late. Yeah, I want to take those words back. So I still give him credit. You know, it's sort of like if someone breaks your computer and then fixes it. Yeah, maybe I'm not going to give him too much credit. That's a bit like this situation. He created the fire and then he put it out. Well, you know, who's one with the matches, Mr. Trump? But still, I think what Bjorn and I were talking about a moment ago still holds. You know, this didn't happen before him. And this is a pretty big change. You know, I think they're still going through the documents, as long as there wasn't something crazy that when the New York Times saw naked women and perhaps minors in photos, like that clearly grabbed their attention, and they did the right thing. They reached out to the government and said, maybe you should take this off, do some redacting if you're going to put it back up. But like the rest of the stuff, I have to believe the Times and the Washington Post and international organizations, people who want to report on this for whatever reasons, they're still combing through it. So once you get past the clearly this is important and we got to do something about this, the rest of it, you're just reading through document after document after document. And AI, of course, helps with that. But when it's all said and done, I assume from the documents that have been released as of today, it's going to take years to fully make the connections and go through it all. And then even really interesting findings. So more than just, yeah, we knew this person had a relationship and we know even more that they had a relationship. Like interesting findings, I think might take a while once again, because it's not a smoking gun like what the New York Times found. So yeah, I still give Trump credit on this. And I think, yeah, you and I are in some agreement on that. But if I can pivot really quickly, I actually have a story up here about the tariffs and the Supreme Court decision. But I'm gonna pull an audible here because it's talking about releasing documents and making public what is, you know, behind closed doors. Let's pull up the BBC again. Maybe we'll hear from British ChatGPT. This was something I saw maybe in the last couple of weeks. I can't recall. But Donald Trump is talking about, hey, did you like those Epstein files? What about that stuff I released about, was it JFK and MLK Jr. or something like that some time ago? We're now talking UFOs, UAPs. This is from the BBC. U.S. President Donald Trump, I think from 2 days ago, says he will direct U.S. agencies, including the Defense Department, to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files on aliens and extraterrestrial life. I think he's teased this before. He may have even teased this on the campaign trail, but it's back in the news again. Once again, talking about the cyclical nature of some of these topics. Trump made the declaration in a post on Truth Social, the platform he owns, after he accused Barack Obama earlier in the day of revealing classified information when the former president said aliens are real on a podcast last week. Wow. Okay. Let me look that up. We'll get to that in a moment. I didn't know about that. Wow. Let's see if we can find something about that. But going back to this this article from the BBC, asked if he also thinks aliens are real, Trump answered, well, I don't know if they're real or not. Honest truth from the president. Former U.S. President Barack Obama told podcast host Brian Tyler Cohen that he thinks aliens are real. Oh, okay. He thinks aliens are real. That was released last Saturday. They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in Area 51, Obama said. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the president of the United States. I believe that's not too far-fetched. He says there's no underground facility. I mean, Area 51 definitely has. I mean, there's a lot of underground facilities, but I guess he's saying there's no underground facility with a refrigerator full of bodies. After the comment made headlines, Obama sought to clarify he thinks it's statistically likely life exists beyond Earth, given the vastness of the universe. Yeah, it's getting watered down the more I find out about it. In a follow-up post on Instagram, Obama clarified, I saw no evidence during my presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us. Really? Exclamation point. Trump said recently on Air Force One that while a lot of people believe in the existence of aliens, he never talks about it and doesn't have an opinion on it. I can believe that. But then a few hours later, he posted again on Truth Social that based on the tremendous interest shown, he will seek the release of files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, that's the new term UAP, and unidentified flying objects, the old school term UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. U.S. has seen renewed public interest in UFOs and extraterrestrial life in recent years, the BBC writes, sparked in 2017 by reports about a secret Pentagon program to probe testimony from pilots and other U.S. military members who had reported seeing strange objects in the sky. In 2022, Congress held the first hearings on UFOs in 50 years, and the Pentagon promised more transparency on the matter, setting up a dedicated office to collect reports of all military UFO encounters. There's this movie that came out in like the last year. I think it's called The Age of Disclosure. A lot of really important people went on camera. This was not Sacha Baron Cohen with Borat where they trick people. They're like, oh, you want to talk about UFOs? Yeah, put up the camera. I'll do that. That was Marco Rubio and a bunch of other people I can't recall right now. So I am interested in this. I don't know what this is going to turn out to be because Donald Trump has said this before, but very interested. We have someone requesting to speak over on Twitter Spaces. I'm going to throw you up, but Apostate Nate, do you have a thought on Trump's renewed interest? Because it was there in the past to release information about UFOs and UAPs.
I mean, I think I share the president's opinion on UAPs. It's just not something I know a whole lot about. I do hop into UAP themed spaces on Twitter from time to time. I can't say that anyone has ever in these spaces presented me with, I guess, what I would call actionable information. It's never happened. But I'm kind of a dreamer, Lee. I like to think about what's in the beyond. There's a great quote from Hamlet, where Hamlet is talking to his best friend, Horatio, about all matters, life and death. And he says, this actually became the title of my master's thesis. He says, there are more things, Horatio, on heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So I don't know, Lee, but I want to know more. That's about the best opinion I can give you.
Have you really not seen anything that convinced you one way or the other? Like, there's a lot of really interesting confirmed, like, this is not played with, this is real video. We have Navy pilots. Those are the ones I'm more familiar with. I think maybe attached to the Nimitz or something. There were like 3 encounters from 2004 to like 2017 that have become the infamous encounters that get talked about over and over again. But not only do we have this footage that shows objects moving in ways that we can't do, and if we can't do it, I do not believe anyone else is anywhere close. And we also have the eyewitness testimony. I mean, these guys, and I think there's a woman that I've seen as well. There's a handful of Navy pilots that have gone on podcasts, that have done interviews with news organizations. They've given testimony in front of Congress, in front of those panels with the nameplates. And their story, from everything I've seen, is very consistent. Have you seen any of that? Has that changed your viewpoint at all? At this point, the way it's changed my viewpoint, when I was younger, I would say, oh yeah, definitely aliens. Now I'm really open to, okay, this is a thing, and there's no denying this is a thing. This is real, but it doesn't necessarily have to be aliens. It could be a lot of different things that you could imagine fits the criteria based on what I just mentioned, all the videos and all the interviews, all the eyewitness testimony. Aliens makes the most sense. That's the one that sticks out, and it's like, oh, of course it's aliens. But I think there are plausible other explanations, not a weather balloon, or swamp gas or whatever, but some sort of other entity. Or if it's not aliens themselves, it's their AI robotic probes that they send. And do the aliens still exist somewhere in the galaxy? Who's to say? But their technology is here. And it really opens up a wider viewpoint where people who were shamed for years and decades, not talking about, I got the anal probe, but people who, were professionals and took it upon themselves to basically ruin their lives to come out here and say this was real and this happened. They've for some time now, they have started looking at these stories again, and sometimes these people are alive, sometimes they're not, and say, oh, actually, we really dismissed this because we were idiots, or we were doing this on purpose, no one cared, whatever the reason. And you can look back and say, oh, wow, like, not only do we have all the stuff of the last 20 some odd years that I just mentioned a moment ago, but we have all this stuff that goes back even further. And then there are those really interesting, like, paintings that show UFOs. There's different, you can call them historical facts about mass sightings in like 1473 or something. And it was documented. I mean, like, stuff like this has gone on for so long in recorded human history, and it just hasn't been looked at in the right lens. And what's really exciting is that in the last however many years, that has changed. So I was surprised, Apostate Nate. I'd love to hear from you. Your hand is up, and then we're going to hear from I Answer in a moment. Stay with us. Appreciate you joining us as a speaker. You really haven't seen anything that's kind of pushed you in one direction or another?
I don't think so, Lee. And one of the reasons for that has to do with my own personal history with this type of information. When I was younger, a lot younger, I was probably a 15, 16-year-old kid when I read this book. It was called The Day After Roswell by Lieutenant Jerome Corsi. And it really offered some fascinating observations, raised some really, really interesting questions. For example, Corsi basically states in the book that what they were tracking, the UAP in that instance, appeared to be something that could defy the laws of inertia as we understand them. And he goes into this explanation, and there's more layered into Corsi's story. But years ago, I learned, and this was probably my first lesson in information literacy, was that Corsi had been widely considered to be a fraud, and that his core claims simply didn't hold up. And I think the fact that that if there were merit to it, I think more people would actually know his name. I think some of your best evidence here is going to be anecdotal, and anecdotal evidence is fine, but it's generally best as a supplemental way of thinking. So it's not the highest quality of evidence, and in fact, we have good reasons for thinking that as people, our eyewitness testimony isn't all that great. I think of the famous gorilla experiment, where there's a circle of people, and they are asked they are to pass the ball between each other and count the number of times that they pass the ball. Well, in the middle of this, somebody in a gorilla suit just wanders into the middle of the circle, beats its chest, and then walks out. And I want to say that it's like something like at least half of the participants, the people in that circle, have no memory of seeing a gorilla do this. And again, this isn't to say throw out your eyewitness testimony, but when it comes to things like UAPs, Lee, I betcha in the vast majority of cases, it is tech. It's something else that has been developed by another nation state. I think Occam's razor here, that's the simplest and most likely explanation. Do I think that some of these stories are interesting? Yeah. Do they get me to think? They sure do. I remember when, and this was at least a year or two ago, when that big, thank you. This was a year or two ago when that big UAP, when Congress just all of a sudden had their hands on it, and there was all this information. All right, well, I'm not seeing any necessarily smoking guns out of that either, and that's fine. I don't know, Lee. And part of me, do I think if the universe is as vast as the astronomers say it is, would there mathematically, at some point, have to be life out there? I think it's an interesting question. Yeah, I wish I could be a little bit more doctrinaire on this, Lee, but I just don't have enough information. But my gut tells me, here's the thing. A lot of UAP discussion basically amounts to, how do you explain this oddity? How do you explain that oddity? How do you explain this oddity? But I never see a full and final working idea. It's just a laundry list of that's weird. That's the approach, incidentally. One of the more famous UAP authors, Eric von Daniken, in his famous book, Chariots of the Gods. What he basically does for 300 pages, I think that's about how long it was, is point out something that doesn't make sense in the world that we live in and say it had to be aliens. And that's literally the thesis of the book over and over again. I consider Chariots of the Gods to be the sloppiest piece of scholarship I've ever read. So I've also been burned in that area too. I don't have a history of being impressed with this crowdly, and that probably informs my biases. I'm rambling, so I'll just I'll land there.
Really quickly, I want to interrupt this important discussion. You just received like a food delivery or package, right? Oh no, he dropped out. I feel like I heard that exchange. I'm going crazy here. I want some confirmation. I have The Day After Roswell pulled up here on Goodreads. It's a 3.82 on a 5-star scale. The Day After Roswell, Colonel Philip J. Corso. That's what I'm seeing here. Retired. This book I do not know. I have. I have read, I think, a long time ago, the Chariots of the Gods, or at least I read some of it. I've certainly heard of it. It's come up in other discussions, and I agree. I think it is pretty poked with holes. It's just an interesting read, I think, is probably what you can get from it. Let's jump over here and hear from I Answer. I Answer, you've been waiting patiently. Do you have some thoughts? We originally were talking about Donald Trump is yet again, it's cyclical. It comes back saying that he's going to release some information about UFOs, UAPs. President Barack Obama was just on a podcast where he said, oh, aliens are definitely real. And then he had to clarify statistically, with how big the galaxy is, with how many billions of, I mean, there's some crazy statistic, like there's as many galaxies that we can see within our observable universe. The universe is larger, but the way light travels, we can't see that far. There's some crazy statistics. It's like for as many stars or as many planets as we think there are in the Milky Way galaxy, there's galaxies full of stars and planets. So just statistically, that's a pretty good bet, in my opinion. What do you think, I Answer?
Well, Nate has heard me tell this story before because Nate and I are old friends from another account. And I lived in Las Vegas for a long time. And there's a road, it's about 2.5 hours north of Las Vegas, called Extraterrestrial Highway. It leads you all the way to Area 51. If you go far enough down that road, the military will turn you around and tell you to go home, tell you to go back. But there's a lot of things on Extraterrestrial Highway, a lot of shops, a lot of things that you can stop in and see. And I always thought it was funny because there was a shop that I stopped at, and on the T-shirt, it showed that aliens had landed on Earth, and they approach a human being, and the first human being they ask for when they approach a human being, the first human being they ask for is, take us to your leader named Will Smith. And I always laughed at that because that's Will Smith. Will Smith is the alien protector of the films, right? Men in Black, the Men in Black series, Independence Day. I am what's it called? Anyways, I say that because I agree with Barack Obama. Now again, it's all entertainment, but I agree with Barack Obama. There's no way human beings on Earth are very naive to think that we're the only beings in the galaxy. It's so naive to think there are other living organisms in the galaxy. There has to be. I mean, there's just no way that this tiny dot of a planet that isn't even I think it's the fifth largest planet of 9, or the sixth largest planet of 9. I mean, we're is the only planet in all of this galaxy. When you look up at the stars, it's impossible to think. Have aliens landed on Earth? Well, if they have, I don't want to know about it. But I don't think they have. I think, in my opinion,
yeah, that's a really interesting way to slice this argument. Is the Barack Obama, what you're just saying now, Barack Obama said on a podcast within the last week or so, like statistically, there's got to be alien life somewhere, versus has it come here? Or you could just argue, has their technology come here? So maybe they didn't come, but they sent drones and things like that, right? And those are two very different opinions. You just pointed out you favor one, but not the other. So you don't think they've been here, but there's got to be life somewhere. There's got to be life somewhere component of this. This is something that I think most credible, like space scientists, at least just off the top of my head, I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, like the Neil deGrasse Tyson sort of thing. They're saying statistically there's got to be life out there, and I think that's something that even in the past people would have laughed at, and it could have ruined someone's career. But now that's pretty normal. I see that a lot in the news. But then this other part of, are they here? That is still taboo, despite all the videos and eyewitness testimony from trained fighter pilots. And it's just really, it's one of those things where you can't quite understand how someone thinks that way, given the data available or just given the input, whatever it is. I'm really, really, really unable to understand, and I'll ask you. We also have PF wants to speak. Stay with us, PF. You're up next. How do you push aside, or how do you poke holes in all the evidence that's come out in the last 20 years? That's not only directly from what's happened in the last 20 years, but also reevaluating and stop demonizing people who were saying these things, not only as far back as basically aircraft was a thing, all the way back like hundreds and thousands of years into human history, these things that are very similar to what people are seeing now. Once again, we don't have to say those are aliens, but if we just say it's the thing, how do you not think the thing has been here on the earth? It really is hard for me to understand, and I don't mean to be condescending. Like, I want to know, like, how do you push through that? We heard from Apostate Nate a moment ago. He thinks most stuff is easily explained. It's a very typical answer. You know, most stuff's easily explained, and the few things that we don't know about doesn't equate to the thing has been here. Do you have a similar viewpoint? How do you get past that? Because I just can't get past that. Once I know that's real, and we have video, we have eyewitness testimony, and all the history I've mentioned a few different times, I can't push that out of my mind. I can't poke holes in all of that.
Everything's recorded. That's how I explain that it's not here yet. Because let's face it, we live in a society, and we've lived in this society roughly since the birth of the iPhone, 2008-ish, 7-ish, somewhere in there, that everything is recorded. And over the last 20 years, everything has been recorded. And alien encounters or visions or UFO sightings or all those things that are being recorded that are coming to light are very blurry. And we all have an iPhone or a Samsung or whatever you carry.
They are blurry, but if I can just jump in to kind of rephrase my question so you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have like the Phoenix lights. I think those in the 90s. You have 3 photos that were filmed with military equipment that shows this. So you're right. There are blurry things out there. And of course, everything can be doctored now. That was the sort of the peace of mind back in the 70s. It's like if you saw a photo, it's like, okay, was it doctored? But it would be like they'd have to throw like a pie tin up in the air. Like that would be the doctoring rather than, oh, no, they just made this with AI. So you're not wrong. I agree with you. But like, what about the really top level stuff? First squeeze olive oil stuff. Like that's not that, right?
I don't think so. I feel like I was saying, how everything is recorded. I feel like if it was real and they wanted to keep a lid on it, there are several ways to keep a lid on it. If they really wanted to expose it, they would expose it. But I mean, let's just face it. My opinion, again, this whole Trump trying to put UFOs out there and whatever is, in my opinion, a way of distracting from something else going on in this administration that we'll just call the E-files. And I think it's just another...
Yeah. So I don't disagree with you. I don't think Trump really cares about this. But because Trump will do just about anything, every time he brings it up, I'm excited because I think it actually could happen. You know, in the recent past, I used to think, what's all this stuff about Greenland? Like, this isn't going to happen. I no longer think that. I'm not saying I support bringing Greenland to the United States, but I think it's an actual possibility because I can't count out Trump on almost anything anymore. So that's why this excites me, is because even if it's just files that kind of confirms what's already out there, I think here it's very valuable because we have so few top quality videos and eyewitness accounts. I think they're very damning, and I think people should pay attention to them more. But there's not a whole lot of that top level stuff. If we get a bunch more of that, that's really exciting. So I don't disagree on your assessment on what Trump's trying to do here. And that's why it's cyclical. He just brings it up whenever he needs that distraction. But if that could actually end in some of this being released, that even if it just confirms that top level video, eyewitness accounts, and other credible reports, I think that's really valuable.
It is, but again, my opinion in this is that it's serving as a distraction from something else. Because, and I'm going to stop here when I say this, he promised back in 2018 or 2019 to release all the JFK files that he still hasn't released because he was trying to distract us from COVID. This is just another plan of the playbook. But I'm going to land it here. Do aliens exist? There's no way that human beings or life on Earth is the only life in the entire galaxy with the millions of stars and planets and everything out there. There's just no way possible. Have they made it to our planet yet? I don't think so. I have to stop there.
Let me get your final thought then. So, how do you describe these really high level references that I keep talking about? Is it that it's just not what they think it is? It's some Chinese thing, or it's an aircraft or something like that? Or do you think, oh no, this is real? It's just not aliens.
It's probably something from another nation. It is real. It's just not aliens. It's probably something from another nation, a foreign nation. Maybe even something that somebody here in the States invented and set in flight. And then they realized, they didn't realize what they had invented at the time. And the military or whoever spotted it maybe have come down and taken it over. I mean, there's things like that happen all the time that we don't even read about. I'm pretty sure, like where I live in Arizona, we have a senator who has actually been to outer space. He's actually an astronaut, Mark Kelly, and he probably would be one of the foremost experts on this type of conversation. But you couldn't tell me that if you got Mark Kelly in here, that he would tell you, "Oh yeah, those are those are alien life, or those are from a foreign nation." He would actually, basically shoot down the idea because we don't know what's being invented. We have no idea what's being invented out there on a daily basis. There's new stuff that comes out every day. And some people don't even know what they've invented themselves. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the weapons that we use, chemical weapons, biological weapons, so on and so forth, are things we wish we could disinvent because we have no idea that we invented them. To quote Nicolas Cage, in The Rock, it's something we wish we could disinvent. It's the worst chemical weapon we've ever invented. That's kind of what
The
happens.
Rock.
Like
With
AI,
something we wish we could disinvent. Yeah, exactly.
like
That's
AI. It's a like AI. It's a steam train rolling downhill that we weren't that people who are working in AI weren't paying attention to, and a lot of people who have left the AI sphere are letting us know now that it's gotten away. The steam train has gotten away, and there's nobody driving the train now. It's just it's getting to a dangerous point, and it's going to keep going that way because there's no way we can stop it. That's just kind of what happens with some of the things that get invented. And not to sound too shallow, but that's pretty much where I'm at with it. I'll stop there.
Thanks. Really great to have you. Hope you can jump on the show the rest of today's show and also in the future. Really great perspective. I disagree, but it's an interesting perspective nonetheless. PFI, you are absolutely next. I absolutely am going to get to you. Apostate Nate has his hand up as well, but you piqued my interest, so I want to check over here with ChatGPT. What does Senator Mark Kelly say about UFO sightings, the credible evidence from Navy pilots? He's a former astronaut. What are his thoughts on the UAP issue?
Senator Mark Kelly, who's a former astronaut and Navy test pilot, takes Navy pilot sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena seriously. He believes they should be formally investigated, and he supports putting more resources into studying them. He emphasizes that while there's no proof of extraterrestrial life, the issue is a matter of national security and pilot safety. Overall, he's grounded in a scientific approach, but sees these reports as credible enough to investigate.
Yeah, it's a pretty positive thing in my mind to hear that, but it also sounds very political speak esque. So yeah, I used to fly planes. I was an astronaut. I never saw anything, but we got to believe these people. It's a national security issue, and we gotta focus on this and find out what it is. It's a really good answer, but it's still coming from the horse's mouth. So I'm glad he's on that side of it, but it still sounds very political, and he doesn't want to say anything that's going to hurt him. All right, PF, I'm putting you up as a speaker, and then you'll be next. But Apostate Nate is my supporter over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. He has his hand up. So let's hear from Apostate Nate, and I'm going to bring PF up, and he is next. What do you have to add, Apostate?
Haley, sorry there, the mute button was sticking. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to have to drop to listener for the rest. That's all. So I'm going to readily hand the mic off to PFI Ukraine. And to that, I say, long live Ukraine. Good show, Lee.
Thank you very much. And if you can do it now or sometime in the future, I want confirmation. I'm not upset, but I want confirmation. When you were talking some time ago on the show, you got a package or a food delivery to your home, correct? Damn it. This might be more interesting to me than if UFOs are aliens, to be completely honest. I'm fascinated by that. That's happened on the show before. I think it's a lot of fun. All right, PFI, great to have you here. It sounds like maybe you know Apostate Nate. What's on your mind? Do you have a thought about this UFOs UAP topic?
Hey, yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate your space. Thanks for having me speak. About the UAP phenomena, I've been really interested about this for a very long time, actually, and had the luxury, I guess, of befriending John Lear on Facebook for some time, and chatted with him and briefly on messaging, and back and forth. And he's a really interesting character, and I believe in all that conspiracy stuff about aliens, extraterrestrials, habitable planets are, the the probable likely answer. But there's a lot of conspiracies and mysteries. Mysteries is probably the best word about our reality and our world, and I'm curious about pretty much all of them. But I have a few that I'm investigating for needs of survival, and that's actually more my interest right now. But everything else is pretty cool and interesting too.
I want to hear more on that, but tell me more about John Lear. I just did a quick Google search. American aviator and UFO conspiracy theorist. I was thinking Learjet, and he is a son of Learjet magnate Bill Lear. So tell me, who's John Lear?
He passed away, but he was a former CIA pilot agent, and he admitted to me and others that he flew drugs and guns over for the CIA and stuff, and he believed a lot of very outlandish things that people would say are really out crazy. But he believed that there's bases on the moon, things like that. And he was the son
You've
of the.
definitely I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, he was the son of the Learjet founder.
So I want to hear more from you, but I want to hear more about John Lear, because I really like the UFOs have underwater bases. That once again, like, they're not aliens idea. There are photos, videos, eyewitness accounts of UFOs going through the water from the sky, going from the water through the sky, and they can do just as crazy, according to one I just mentioned, just as crazy maneuvers in the water as they can in the air. And so this idea of like, well, maybe they're actually from the water. And then so that's like, okay, aliens got a water base. All right, okay. Or like coevolution, and their previous, is it the Silurian hypothesis that there were previous one or more human-like civilizations on the earth, and then they either left or there was a natural disaster. So okay, there was a natural disaster, and then they go underground. They go in the water. Like, this is all interesting to me. So you have piqued my interest. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. Tell me about John Lear, who is a son of the Learjet magnate and also apparently involved in UFO research.
Is indeed the son of Bill Lear, who founded the Learjet Corporation. John himself was an accomplished pilot with numerous aviation records. In the 1980s and 1990s, he became widely known for his involvement in UFO conspiracy theories. Lear claimed to have inside information about government cover-ups of extraterrestrials, secret bases, and even more outlandish claims about alien civilizations. While his views were controversial and not supported by mainstream science or evidence, he did influence a subset of UFO enthusiasts.
Quick follow-up here. So anything that he said, has that ever been tied to credible information? Is this something that now, as there's more openness and acceptance of people who have seen things and military video of apparent UFOs, anything he said in the past that now has resurfaced or given more credible belief to?
Not really. John Lear's claims were often quite extreme and didn't rely on verifiable evidence. Even with the recent openness about unidentified aerial phenomena, none of his specific stories or theories have been vindicated by credible evidence. The current investigations by the military and government are more focused on safety, national security, and understanding what these sightings are, not validating older, unsupported claims.
And then final question, his personal history, was he indeed verified to be a member of the CIA? Did he have access to things? Even if he said he did things in the CIA that can't be corroborated, did he have a government connection?
There's no solid evidence that John Lear was officially a CIA operative. He did have a well-known aviation career and flew missions under contract for various government agencies, which some pilots do. But that's a big leap from being a clandestine agent. Many of his claims of insider knowledge were unverified, and no official records back up any deep intelligence connection. So while he was around aviation circles, the government insider persona was more part of his narrative than a documented reality.
Interesting. So, not trying to throw under the bus what we just heard from PFI, but I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper. And this is actually very straightforward for this type of person, is that they make these claims and then it's like, oh, okay, well, he flew government contracts. He was obviously involved in aviation. And that's where the like physical breadcrumbs kind of actually end. It reminds me a bit of Bob Lazar, who says he worked at a sort of subcomponent of Area 51. He always uses a specific name. He doesn't say I worked at Area 51. He says I worked for like something, and that was part of that. And he would fly there, and he said other people who live like in Vegas or somewhere else would fly there, and then you would stay, and then you'd go back. And he said he saw multiple craft, but he specifically worked on one craft. And the way that he describes it in a nutshell is that they would kind of break this open and try to figure out how it works every so often and then seal it up, wait till human technology caught up a little bit more or a lot more, whatever it might be. And then they, all right, take off the cover in the hangar, and we're going to take a look at it again and see what we can learn from this. And if I recall correctly, Bob Lazar says a lot of human technology has been based on the recovered craft, and it sounds very plausible just in theory, because if you have these technological artifacts, because he said some of them were very old, so dating back a very long time, and then you try to look at it from our perspective, especially the further back in time you go, how could you even tell how this works? You know, if you took a Toyota Corolla and sent it back to like 395, what would they even do with that, right? So just from a theoretical perspective, it makes sense to me. He has some things in his past that are unfortunate that people have used to discredit him. But from what I understand, unless someone wants to correct me, he always said that he worked at, I think it was Los Alamos, some like actual laboratory. And then the government's like, we have no record of this. This is not true. And I believe they have actually corroborated that he did work there, because he was in a newspaper one time because he made a rocket car, like just strapped a rocket to a car. Like that's sort of crazy. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want because it's fun and I know the technology. And in the article, it's like, oh, he works at Los Alamos, whatever it is. I can't remember the exact laboratory. So I believe that's been laid to rest, that he actually did work there, not necessarily Area 51. But then it sort of gives some sympathy to him, because he has said that the government has tried to ruin his life and take away his history that shouldn't be debatable. And then some of the things he has said, I believe, have been corroborated. And the way that he describes the craft that he works on, once again, seems really possible. The way he talks about its gravity propulsion and how they would like test it and do different things, like it all seems like it actually could have happened. For such a far out, wild story, when you actually listen to it, at least from my perspective, it's like, oh no, like this is not the anal probe in the middle of South Dakota. This is like, this makes sense. There's a documentary made about him in the last however many years. He's done a bunch of interviews. I like his Joe Rogan interview that he did, just because I liked hearing him talk. As I've mentioned before, I'm not a fan of Joe Rogan. I don't think he's actually a very good interviewer, but he has interesting people on. And yeah, so it's just like another thing. So if I had asked ChatGPT about Bob Lazar and all the claims he made, he'd be like, yeah, he's made some claims, and most of them, if not all of them, haven't been corroborated. But I think it has been proven that he did work at some laboratory, and the government for years apparently said that was not the case. So that at least leads some credibility to, oh, the government's trying to silence him. Like I said, he's a complicated guy. There's a lot of stuff in the past that you can point to. But boy, is that one hell of a story. And I love hearing about Bob Lazar and his interviews, because he just, from what I can tell, he's remained consistent since like the late 80s or whenever he went public. His story really hasn't changed. And a lot of the things that he said back in the day when, oh, this guy needs to be locked up for his own protection and for all of us, from all of us to be safe as well. The stuff that he has consistently said actually makes a lot of sense based on these renewed interest inquiries and videos from the last 20 years from the military and the eyewitness accounts. It all folds really neatly into the narrative and explanation that Bob Lazar has been saying for like 40 years, 30 some years, however long it's been. And it easily didn't have to be that way. You know, if you just think this guy's a fraud, okay, that's really possible too. He hasn't really made a lot of money out of this. I think it's safe to say that it's actually probably been worse for him than if he had said nothing or not invented this story, if you want to look at it this way. But he did talk, and the stuff he has said has remained consistent, and it folds so neatly into this renewed interest in all the information we've gotten from the military over the last, or from what happened over the last 20 years. And then even further, if you go back in the past, I mean, there were headlines back in the 20th century, like the 50s, 60s, 70s, of like mass UFO sightings in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., sightings of UFOs at nuclear missile silos. Like this stuff's not made up. It's all verifiable, at least verifiable that people they said they saw something. And like there have been weird historically documented encounters where like buildings have lost power and stuff has been shut down. Like, so like all of these things that folds so neatly into how Bob Lazar talks about how the UFO that he worked on operates and how it affects things around it and what it can do. So at the very least, I think he's like the needle in the haystack, because someone mentioned previously, a lot of these people, was it apostate Nate? you can't trust them. They all kind of fall into the same weirdo category. Those are my words. And Bob Lazar certainly is an odd man. I think a lot of super intelligent people who get involved in laboratory work are. So, okay, fits the bill. But he's the needle in the haystack. He's the guy who was smart, I believe, has been proven to have worked for a national laboratory and has consistently had this story. And the more time goes on, the more his story really does seem to fold into everything else. And so I'm really, really excited to talk about Bob Lazar and learn more about him. And just, he did like a 2 or 3 hour interview with Joe Rogan, and I watched it several times, and every time it makes a little bit more sense to me. It connects more with what we're talking about today and the sightings and the videos and the way he describes it. He's a scientist, so he describes it kind of at a high level at times. Other times it's a little dumbed down. You can understand it. And every time I watch it, I feel like I understand what he's trying to convey a little bit more. Again, it doesn't mean it's real, but I understand it more, and I get a little something extra every time I watch it. So if you're not familiar with Bob Lazar, I would encourage you to check him out. Doesn't mean that he's right. I'm not saying it's proven that he's right, but it just, every time I go back to his story, just check mark, check mark, check mark. It really makes a lot of sense. If it's real, and we figure out 40 years from now that he was telling the truth, whatever timeline it might be, we're going to go back and say, how did he not have more credibility? All of this fits so neatly and makes so much sense. But at the same time, if on his deathbed he recants, well, it would be the opposite. How did he have any notoriety? He was just saying things and people believed him. But man, if what he is saying is completely made up, round of applause, because it's really convincing in my mind, and it is, once again, it's a well thought out narrative, because I think it was the late 80s or something. If he had to come up with this story and basically not change the details, I don't know how he could have done that. I get how someone says, "Oh, I was out on a dirt road at night and I saw a thing and I went up into the sky and then stuff happens and we had a communication for decades and they'd come visit me and stuff." Like, okay, I could make that up now. There's several examples to steal from, and you could just kind of think this through. But the detail that Bob Lazar goes through and how it fits so nicely into everything else, at the very least, I would give him a round of applause for being able to accomplish all that, because that really leaves everyone else in the dust. He's really, in my opinion, been able to elevate himself, even if it's just purely because he's smart and he came up with a good story. At the end of the day, that's kind of respectable. PFI, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I tend to believe Bob Lazar's story, because to me, I have a story too that I've been repeating for 8 years that you might find interesting because it's in a public sort of news sphere. But people who come forward with these stories, whistleblowers, sort of, maybe that's the correct term. I don't know. We often try to survive the conspiracy and the trail. They try to censor us and they try to um, erase our history and stuff. So like that's something that I haven't experienced yet, but I totally believe guys like Bob Lazar, because
I'm
what's
taking
his
the bait,
motivation?
PFI. I want to hear this. What can you tell me about your own story?
Oh well, I got 1,000 reasons for being in Ukraine. But one of them is that in my home country of birth, Canada, Toronto, in fact, I was present and privy to a murder conspiracy, and in 2017, and the perpetrators want to eliminate me from testifying.
So I might have missed some of the important information here. So you're from Canada, but are you in Ukraine now? What was the?
Yeah, I'm in Ukraine now. I've been here since 2023.
And so you said you had a lot of reasons for that change. One of them being this that you just told us. How are people trying to stop you from testifying, and how does that work? If you're in Ukraine, would you go back to Canada to testify? Fill in some of these blanks for me.
For sure, yeah. Well, the police themselves have denied me witness protection. And they have, I think they've contributed to the obfuscation of evidence in the case. And I think other peoples would agree. But the perpetrators themselves have expressed their desire to murder me because I've been doing my own investigating. Uh, and in fact, I began investigating before the actual murder. I documented their conspiracy to commit. So I had basically smoking gun evidence. And to this day, people tell me I'm crazy and then I should forget it and let it go. But I need to help investigate it because I'll save my life.
Is this something I can look up? Could you give me some dates or some towns or some names? Is this something that's online in news sources?
I myself have a petition with only 40 or so signatures on change.org/open Sherman records. And the victims were the Sherman, Honey and Bernard Sherman of Toronto. They were the founders of Apotex, Canada's largest pharmaceutical corporation.
So I got this up. Let me let me read from this really quick so I can wrap my head around this better, and then we'll jump back to you. So change.org/open Sherman records. Was that what I went to? It changed the URL when I went there.
Yeah, open Sherman records. I can post it in the pill.
Yeah. Go ahead and do that. I have it up here now because I do a video stream simultaneously. So the issue. This online global petition intends to serve our mutual interest in public safety through the exposure of records that are held in the sole authoritarian grip of the Toronto Police Services. Damn Toronto police people. Through this petition, the signatories request that the legislative recipients of this document shall immediately unseal and fully publicly disclose the pertinent details of all calls to 911 regarding Old Colony Road in Toronto from December 14th, 2017. On December 13th, December 14th of 2017, I attempted to halt homicides of Honey and Bernard Sherman via convenience store clerk's cellular device. Yeah, there's a lot of detail here. I won't go through it all. Interesting. So then you went to Ukraine, you said in 2023, correct? Why Ukraine, and what has it been like to be there since 2023?
Well, why Ukraine? That's a really good question, but because there's so many reasons to come here. One is that I speak some of the language, and it's a war zone. Countries are really in turmoil, so a lot of people wouldn't want to come here. And I also felt like death is inevitable, and I want to be in control of it. In my case, I don't want to die be a victim and get tortured. I'd rather, if I am gonna die, which we are gonna one day, everybody does. I want to do it for some positive cause, like to help somebody in the process, or at least on my feet.
And so you said you're from Canada, but is your family Ukrainian? You mentioned some language skills.
Yeah, my ex-girlfriends have been sort of Eastern European from time to time, and I did sort of have a common law marriage, which led me to come here before in 2016 with her. So I've been here before, and it's been it's been really rewarding and amazing to be here, and it's been really I can't tell you how terrifying it's been sometimes, and the horrors that I've seen. It's really horrifying. War is terror, and I want to help this stop.
So I don't want to go into too much detail, but when you see what you've seen and it's been terrifying, have you been around like land combat? Is it the drone attacks? Is it the missiles? Could you give me an idea of what you're talking about? You don't have to go into those details, but I'm just trying to think like are you in an area that is far away from the fighting, but missiles can go anywhere, or are you closer to the fighting?
I have been. I did serve in the military under multiple contracts. The first one was the Foreign Legion, and then after that, I was with the 92nd Brigade as a storm trooper, assault soldier, and that's not really my forte. I'm kind of aging, and I have less energy, and I'm more of a technician, sort of engineer. So I transferred over to the drone operations, which was more my field, and I learned quite a lot. And I still work in this sector, sort of as a civilian now. I've resigned, and I'm a non-profit organization, NGO founder. So I build power banks, and I provide civilians with solar panel solutions and energy solutions here. And I do carpentry, and I hand out cash whenever I can, and anything I can do, really. But there's a lot of harm in terms of the destruction is there's all kinds of different weapons being used by Russia, not just explosive weapons, but like asymmetric war. They're using informational war. I myself, we were targeted multiple times by different systems. Our group was targeted by grad systems, thermobaric grads, fiber optic drones, FPV drones. There was gunshot fire around us a few times, and that's just at the front line. But as civilians experience the same things. There's just less protection.
Yeah, one of the negatives about the 24/7 news cycle and the Gaza conflict is that even though this is still ongoing in Ukraine, the war of Russian aggression, where Russia yet again invaded Ukraine, um, this was a big deal when it happened. And, now U.S. news and everyone else, they don't cover it the same way. Now, if something terrible happens, okay, yeah, it'll pop up, but it just doesn't get the same coverage. So it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. I like the fact that anything around the world can be covered by American news organizations, but at the same time, you can imagine there's a lot of stories, a lot of information about Ukraine that hasn't gotten out since that initial huge thrust by news organizations sending people there. Journalists have been killed there. And it was the same thing with Gaza. When Gaza first happened after the attack on Israel and they invaded Gaza, it was like nonstop coverage. And then as time went on, a little less coverage, a little less coverage, a little less coverage, right? So just one of those things. It's just how the world works now. I want to jump back to this is a CBS News article. 5 years after a billionaire, this is dated December of 2022. So at that time, 5 years after a billionaire and his wife were found murdered, their family is offering $35 million to catch their killer. A drug company billionaire and his wife were found dead in their Toronto home, and their family says they are now offering that $35 million to solve the murders. Barry Sherman, who founded a generic drug maker, Apotex. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Apotex. I don't know how else to say it.
PF5, give me, yeah, Apotex, yep. And his wife, Honey, were found dead in their mansion on December 15th, 2017. The two were hanging by belts from a railing that surrounds their indoor pool and were in a semi-seated position on the pool deck. With the suspect still at large, the couple's son, Jonathan Sherman, he said he is adding $25 million to the reward They had already offered 10, so 25 plus 10, $35 million. This was back in 2022. Don't know the current status. So in 2021, police asked for the public's help after releasing video of a suspect in the murders. There's security footage of a man or woman walking down a sidewalk with a hat who seems to kick up his or her right boot as they take each step. The video does not show the suspect's face. The 75-year-old Sherman was known for litigiousness and aggressive business practices as he developed Apotex, which had a global workforce of about 11,000 people. In a 2001 book called Prescription Games, because it's a pharmacy company, he mused that a rival might want to kill him. The police say they have largely eliminated everyone else picked up on security footage in the area, and they had a great deal of confidence the suspect in the video kicking up their heels is linked to the scene. The couple was among Canada's most generous philanthropists. So, okay, cutthroat business practices, but they gave a lot of money, and their deaths shocked Canadian high society and the country's Jewish community. They made numerous multi-million-dollar donations to hospitals, schools, and charities, and had buildings named in their honor. They hosted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a Liberty Party fundraiser in 2015. The day after their bodies were found, however, some prominent news media outlets quoted unidentified police officials as saying the deaths appeared to be a murder-suicide. That upset the couple's 4 adult children, who then hired their own team of investigators and a pathologist. Oh, good for them. Who conducted second autopsies on their parents. Police later said publicly they believed the Shermans were murdered. Sherman faced legal action from cousins who said they had been cut out of the company over the years, but a judge dismissed the claim just months before the couple was found dead. So that's an interesting piece of information. Yeah, that's a gruesome murder. It's always weird, just outside of this specific story. It's always weird when you hear about people who live like in a mansion who were murdered like this, which the police say they were murdered, so there's no more doubt it was not a murder-suicide. Because it's just like, I guess, I don't know because I'm not a billionaire, I'm not a millionaire, but if I was living in a mansion, I would have some like really good locks and security and maybe like guards. Maybe you don't want to live that way. And maybe that sort of danger just fades if you ever think about it. But I got to think they had the money. So it's just always interesting when something happens like this. I'm not saying this is part of the story. Like, how could this have happened? But just it happens often enough with really rich people that just kind of always makes me think, like, if I was that rich, I feel like I would live in a bunker. Yeah. No one's murdering this billionaire. Okay, so PFI, is there anything specific you want to add here? You're saying that you knew of the conspiracy and tried to do something about it, and now you have fled Canada for your own safety.
It's come to that I had to leave Canada, and I don't like to call it fleeing because I can return. I'll just be extremely at risk. They're not providing me witness protection. I did try to stop it in multiple ways, and I'm authoring a book about this, which I'm withholding right now because I can't disclose all this stuff yet to the public because some things I need to be able to hold close to my chest so that the police know that it's only me that's providing this information. Right, and they have frequently been refusing and obstructing justice in this conspiracy. They allowed the home to be demolished, for one, and their initial assessment was obviously false. There's other tangents. Like there was another murder in Calgary just recently prior to that murder, and the victims were also in a staged manner, staged in the same manner. And I'm basically investigating that one too, just not with the same sort of uh, energy, because I don't know anyone around there. I have nothing connected to central or western Canada. I've never been there even. So, but I've been repeating the same story for 8 years, basically, and I've identified that walking man many times. He's changed his name. I recently published these people's phone numbers
Well,
because I'm so
so
just
that's my question. Have you gotten in touch with the children of this murdered couple? Have you tried to cash in? Hey, man, on $35 million. Like, I feel like there might be a pathway here. I don't know anything about this, but like, if 3 years ago, 4 years ago, they were willing to offer $35 million, and if you have this information, how is that played out?
difficult. There's a lot of obstructionism, and there's an unwillingness, a discretion on the police services to investigate. And on multiple occasions, they failed to investigate
Yeah, but
adequately.
this is the family is saying that screw the police, we'll give you $35 million. Like I'm not doubting your story, but my point is that if I myself in your position, from how I understand it, if I had really essential important information about a billionaire couple that were brutally murdered in their home, and their kids are offering $35 million. This was 3-4 years ago, but at that time it was happening. I tried to reach out to them. Have you reached out to them?
Many different ways, through different means, and through different persons. I've called the law firm that I think I spoke with Jonathan, but he claimed not to be the same individual. Whoever I spoke with that said their name was Jonathan, they said maybe it's a different law firm. I don't understand, but there is a lot of strangeness going on about this conspiracy. I've tried to reach the family, their representatives, their lawyers. One of the people that I spoke to regularly recently passed away. He was a friend of Barry, Jack Kay. I had been communicating, and I met with Jack Kay, but I have had very little luck in getting direct contact with any of the family.
It's disappointing to hear. We are hitting. We've already gone over 2 hours. That's usually my sweet spot for the show. So let's do this. I'm going to ask ChatGPT about this and see if I can get an update, because this is the article I found and it's 3 or 4 years old. Then after that, if anybody has anything they want to add, I want to hear comments from people, and then we'll end the show. So let's jump over here to ChatGPT. Okay. So, ChatGPT, there was a billionaire and his wife who were found murdered in the Toronto area back in December of 2017. They're the Shermans, and their family, their children, back in around late 2022, was offering up to $35 million to catch their killer. That's the update I have. But is there any more information that's happened since December of 2022? And is there anything interesting you can tell me about this case?
As of 2025, the murders of Canadian billionaires Barry and Honey Sherman remain unsolved. Despite a $35 million reward, no arrests have been made. In late 2023, police disclosed that a major warrant executed in 2022 produced thousands of files, and they have since started using AI tools to analyze data. Challenges remain, but the case is still active and ongoing.
Are there any leads at all? Is there any tiny bit of evidence that's connecting to a motive or to someone who could have been responsible for this. I'm looking for anything. What is there some sort of prevalent idea of why this billionaire couple was brutally murdered in their home?
The murders of Barry and Honey Sherman in Toronto remain unsolved. Investigators have explored potential motives, including business disputes involving Barry's company, family inheritance tensions, and even ideological reasons. A figure seen on surveillance footage has not been identified, and no formal suspects have been named. Despite ongoing efforts, including new data analysis, the case is still open and no arrests have been made.
All right, I think that's all we're getting out of ChatGPT today. Okay, really great show. Great to have everybody here. It's been a fun time over on Twitter Spaces with the interaction we've been having. And then also Bjorn over on Stereo. It was great to have him. It's been a while since I've heard from Bjorn. It's been great to have Apostate Nate with us. Both Apostate Nate and Bjorn, my supporters over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. So if you want to, I'll just be honest. If you want a preferred spot, anytime you raise your hand, you want to talk, I'll throw you up. Support me over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. But before we say goodbye, anybody over on Twitter, just go ahead and unmute yourself or request to speak if you're not already a speaker. Any final thoughts? We've covered a lot of ground on today's show, ending with a not so positive topic, but hey, that's just how news works sometimes. Any other comments? I would love to hear them.
Well, it's just me. I think the only other speaker at the moment, but the independent media are doing great work. A lot of the mainstream media won't publish a lot of stuff, so you guys are doing really all the legwork that human beings out here really need to hear, because there's a lot of crazy ass shit going on.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't consider myself an independent news person or anything. I just like talking about news. But still, yeah, I appreciate the compliment. And I hope we can have you on the show again. Everybody over on Twitter Spaces, whether you've spoken or just been listening, hope to have you on the show. Follow me on twitter.com/NEWZ debates. You can go to bit.ly/NEWZ debate. Has all my links, including Patreon. And I do a video simulcast on Twitch and Rumble. So a lot of my previous episodes are available there. Also do a simulcast on Stereo on most days, and that was where we were hearing Bjorn. So great discussions. Stay safe, everybody. And until next time, have a great rest of your weekend, or I guess if you're in a different time zone, whatever day it might be. Take care. Bye-bye.